to the All Things Real Estate Podcast with our very own Josh Barker. With more than 20 years of experience and over 5,000 properties sold, Josh brings a unique perspective to the real estate market. Let's get started.
So we're back again.
We are back again.
It is May.
It is May,
right? Yeah,
it's May.
This isn't Russia, is it, Danny? So it's May, and there's still this. So many of the same topics that we were talking about last time are still flowing forward.
Yep.
Like interest rates.
Yep.
They're still in the fives.
Yep.
Gone up. People are
Yep.
freaking out because they're so used to almost free money. Now
Yep.
that money's not free.
Yep.
But we also still have low inventory.
Yep.
And so we have those headwinds and tailwinds battling right now. But people are trying to what should I do? What's the
Yep.
market going to do?
Yep.
One of the big concerns that people aren't talking about is what's the difference between purchasing and renting. They're real concerned about interest rates and buying,
Yep.
but they're wondering, is the market going to continue to appreciate? And should I hold out?
Right.
What are some thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of it's a pretty big question. It'd be really hard, I think, for our listeners or viewers to follow this without looking at a graph or something. But I think the example I could give you is like take a house right now, for example, like a $400,000 home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that the appreciation of this 20% stuff that we've seen over the last couple of years, that's not consistent. That's not going to happen. So
Crazy
let's just use a number that we agree on. Let's say that it appreciates at 3%, right? Which is 5% below inflation.
I think that's conservative. I think that's a conservative number.
And I think most people would agree, right? So let's say you took a $400,000 home. Next year, it's going to be $412,000 based on that example.
Mm-hmm.
The year after that, it's $425,000.
Mm-hmm.
Year after that, it's $440,000. Year after that, it's going to be like $465,000, right? So within,
Compounds fast.
It does
happens
compound
really fast. You
Yeah.
just 4 years and all of a sudden.
Exactly. So 8 years in, you're like well over $500,000, right?
Exactly.
All right. So that person that bought that property has an equity in that home of at least $100,000 at year 7 or year 8, somewhere in there. Okay. And that's real impact of appreciation. But here's where the spread really kicks in. If you rents right now are projected to go up about 5% a year every year going forward, right? And so that means that over the next 8 years, rents are going to be up, let's say 50%.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens,
They're going to climb faster than 3% appreciation.
right?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward that person is trying to decide between renting and buying. Let's push them out 8 years from now. The one that bought probably has well over $100,000 of equity,
25% equity,
right? Plus, they don't have the increase in the monthly living expense because they have a fixed mortgage on their home.
Mm-hmm.
The person that rents has no equity, and that person is paying probably up to 50% more in rent at the very end. And if you look at the difference, the delta between those two, it's probably $100,000 or $200,000 difference between the two decisions. And so again, I know it's hard to listen to it without actually seeing the graphs, but what I can say is that do the math. It's expensive not to own a home long term.
The other thing is that so many people that talk about this, they get put in two groups. One group talks kind of like a day trader. They talk about like the stock market. They talk in these like 30-day, 90-day cycles. It's like real estate is not a 90-day cycle. It needs to be more about what you just said. Hey, let's fast forward 5-8 years. Right. And the other thing is you may not have a 401k, but you will have a place where you lay your head at night.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just think that people get caught up in that really short term. Yeah, well, interest rates are really high. And, I saw the market collapse 14 years ago. It's like, this market is nothing like that market.
No, in fact, we should probably talk about that for just a minute. I think we've talked about it in a previous podcast, but just for a few listeners, that if you looked at 2006 or 7, and that's arguably the peak of that last market, right? Mm-hmm. You had well over 50% of purchases were non-owner occupied. They were speculation types of purchases. Now today, it's less than 10%, right?
And that's a huge number.
Huge difference. Second thing is that back then, negative amortization loans or interest-only loans with balloon payments were the common type of loan that a borrower would use. So they were using, risky loan products, artificially low monthly payments that were all going to reset within like 3 years. They're going to be paying twice as much for a mortgage payment. Whereas of today, people are buying on typically 30-year fixed mortgages where there is no balloon payment and there's not going to be any major increase in their monthly payment, right? And so that's another massive difference. Back then in 2006 and 7, a lot of purchases were using what's called stated income. Meaning they weren't even showing a bank statement. They weren't showing anything to qualify. They were just literally saying, this is how much money I make. And the lender said, okay, no problem. And they gave them a loan, right?
Yeah.
Today, no. Proof of employment, tax returns, bank statements, sourcing all your income. I mean, right now, the mortgage credit affordability index, right now, it's really low, meaning that it's pretty tight and difficult for people to get financing compared to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot different. And so the markets today are very stable. And so even if the market slides in terms of demand because of interest rates going up, which we all fully expect is going to happen, people are not qualifying now that were qualified, 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. When we see that happen, we're just not going to see the same shift in inventory. It's just not going to be the same as it was before.
Yeah, and another thing is that the people that are saying, hey, interest rates are kind of high, I don't know if I want to buy now, you have to think about a couple of things. Number one, if you're going to wait for interest rates to come down, you're going to miss out on the appreciation of the market, right?
Yep.
Number two, when those interest rates come down, when those interest rates come down, that 3% that you're talking about, it'll be more than 3%. Because every time the interest rates have gone down,
it causes values to go up.
It does.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, if you purchase now, I was talking to a lender the other day. I won't name anybody, but he's a really smart guy. And he was telling me right now, he was telling people, no, go ahead and get the higher interest rate in a couple of years, because we are going to probably go into a recession. There's probably no way to avoid it.
Right.
Feds are going to be forced to bring those interest rates back down.
Yeah.
You can always refinance then.
Yeah, you can.
So normally, lots of times when the interest rates were in the high twos, people were saying, hey, look, you should buy this rate down.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're saying the opposite. No, go ahead and go with the higher rate.
Yep.
You don't want to pay the fees. Why? Because you're probably going to refinance in 18 months when the Feds do bring that interest rate down.
Yeah.
And you're going to have picked up that appreciation.
Yep.
And there's not inventory in the market. That's a big thing that's easy to glaze over.
Yeah.
But it's powerful is that it is very, very hard to replenish inventory.
Oh, yeah.
Very hard.
And especially in California.
And it's not getting any easier.
Not any easier. Right now, I think we're sitting at 1.98, almost 2 months supply of homes for sale. And for our listeners and watchers out there, what it means is that if nothing else comes up for sale, it would only take 2 months to sell off the existing inventory. That's how low the inventory is right now. And that's right now. I mean, we're in the middle of spring. We're supposed to have more inventory right now and going through summer than we would at any other time. It hasn't been the case, though. We haven't seen this massive jump. And really, I think what it is, or part of it, a contributing factor would be is that so many people purchase with such low interest rates that they're literally looking around going, I don't want to give up my, 2 3/4% interest rate.
Yeah.
So they're hanging out in their homes, which, hey, I get it. Congratulations. But that is having an impact. New construction, it's not a huge, meaningful impact here in the community. I mean, we're getting some new construction, and I'm certainly not complaining for what we're getting now. But we're still grossly undersupplied compared to what the demand actually could be or is. And I don't see that changing anytime sooner because the cost for construction is super high. Cost of land acquisition is still high. Development costs are super high. So, it's just we're going to continue to be in a housing shortage, not just nationally, but locally we're still at a shortage too. So.
Two of those major contributors, one is labor.
Yep.
Anybody who's talked about, hey, I needed some things done in my home.
Yep.
Beyond just the general contractor, all the contractors are understaffed.
Oh, totally.
And that's not something that you're just going to replenish overnight.
No.
That's going to take years.
No.
And the other piece is materials.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know with all of the supply chain disruption, I don't know if it's going to get picked back up but it just doesn't. I not like I'm plugged in, but I don't see where like all of a sudden it just catches up in the supply chains, everything's great and prices just plummet for, materials, lumber. I saw this great photo that tried to show the cost, how much $1,000 of lumber you could have purchased. I think it was like 16 months ago versus today. And it showed 2 pallets.
Yeah.
And one was huge and one was tiny. To give you an idea physically
what it's doing.
It's doing. That 8.5% inflation, it's a lot more than that with building materials.
Oh yeah.
That's
well, inflation right now, obviously, which is why the Feds are saying, hey, we're looking at raising rates again. I mean, right now we're in May. They just came out with a report early this month that said that the inflation numbers, I think, were at 8.2 or 8.3. Which means the Fed is likely going to raise those interest rates sometime this next month at another 0.5%, another 0.5 point. For our listeners out there right now, our interest rates are averaging about 5.5 to 5 3/4. That kind of tends to be what the rate is. It's bouncing a little bit right now as the markets are trying to find themselves. But that's kind of the general idea. 5.5, 5 3/4 is what interest rates are now for a 30-year fixed mortgage. when the Fed raises that rate, we're fully expecting to see interest rates in the low sixes. That's the next increase that we're expecting. It's going to have an impact on affordability. It's going to have an impact on demand. We are going to eventually see the housing market stop in terms of the demand. It's going to start to get killed off by the interest rates going up. We're expecting that. But what I think people need to think about, though, is that it doesn't necessarily translate into lower sales prices. What it's going to do is it's going to eliminate demand, but there's not a lot of supply in the market. And so if that supply doesn't jump relative to demand, if that supply doesn't continue to grow rapidly as a result, then prices aren't going to move that much. It's only if that inventory relative to demand really starts to grow, that's really the only way we could start to see prices softening. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
but
I still think, sorry to interrupt, but I
Yeah.
still think that Redding is a unique because it is one of the last areas in California
Yeah.
before you leave. Everybody's leaving. No, not everybody. A tiny percentage is leaving, but a lot of people are leaving the major cities and coming
Yep.
up here. And so LA can see a decline. San Francisco, San Jose, they can see declines, and they have, where Redding has continued to grow.
It has.
Because we are somewhat of an anomaly within the state.
Yep.
Where even though the state might be going down, this area is going up.
Well, that report that came out of, I think it came out of Stanford. I think it's the Hoover Institute in Stanford, but they determined what the number one reason for people leaving the state of California was, and it wasn't politics relative to what some people might have thought, but it was actually just affordability. Yeah. So L.A., San Diego, Orange County, San Francisco, the Bay Area overall, cost for homes there are extremely expensive, right? Redding, relative to all of those things, was very inexpensive. And we continue to be less expensive than the rest of the state. And we have a beautiful place to live. So we're still seeing people, like to your point, coming in from those locations. Those are our feeder markets. They really are. Those are the markets that we see the greatest amount of influx. It's not people moving from out of state moving to Redding. It's people from inside of the state and bigger cities that are moving to Redding. And we're seeing that a lot.
Along those same lines, I had a headhunter reach out to me in regards to a position with a company in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And one of the things that caught my attention was they said they wanted me there 2 days a month.
2 days a month?
2 days a month. So this is a larger company, but it was just looking for, it doesn't matter.
He didn't know who he was talking to.
Yeah. But
2 days a month.
Well, think about that for a second. It's like, okay, you have to be in San Francisco.
Yeah.
2 days a month.
Yeah.
I mean, that suddenly makes it opens up that range. You don't have to be in San Jose and Mountain View and commute in.
No, you got a lot more options.
Yeah, that's like you fly in for 2 days a month.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think you're just going to, I think that's one of those contributors. And we've had a few, I don't know if we talked about it on this podcast, but when Adam McIlvaine was, he ran for city council, man, he had a couple of just fantastic ideas, and I haven't heard anything about him. It bums me out.
Yeah.
But two of them, one of them was the high-speed internet, to have the city of Redding actually be an ISP.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was like, hey, if you can offer high-speed internet, this isn't like, yes, you can watch YouTube at home.
This is like really high speed.
Really high speed. We have all the infrastructure for it, and there was grants for it, but it would make downtown one of those hubs where companies would move, companies that have like 15 employees, 21 employees, all engineers, all people making pretty darn good money.
Sure.
Mid 100s, maybe a little bit higher. Like we said before, down in the Bay Area, that's not a lot.
No.
You're making $150,000 a year. You're sharing an apartment with somebody.
Yeah.
You're making $150,000 a year here. You're easily purchasing it. You own a home, a nice home.
Yeah.
And so that was a project that's kind of ancillary to the, hey, 2 days a month, that kind of thing. The other big thing that I remember him, I'm hijacking this podcast, but the other big project that he talked about that I thought was, building a major solar array outside the city.
Yeah.
We're the second sunniest city in the United States. Next
Take
to
advantage
Arizona,
of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And his tagline, I don't know if he made this up, was it's the dam of the future, right?
Yeah.
Shasta Dam was huge, built REU on Shasta Dam.
Yep.
But anyway, these kind of projects, that was kind of anecdotal, that, hey, more companies are saying, you know what, if you can just be here a couple of days.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I see as pressure. That's why I don't see Redding, not like I have a crystal ball. I don't see Redding coming down. I see it leveling off, like you said. I think 3% is a very conservative number.
Yeah. And
it's kind of a cooling off after we did have that.
Yeah.
I mean, 20%, I think it was even more than that. I mean, and we had it compounded over years.
Yep.
I mean,
well, and it is. And I think just being sensitive to those who are in the market now, that have been in the market. So I was talking about this with our sales team this last week, and I said, there's two different groups of people that you're going to run into now in the market. You're going to have the group of buyers that have been in the market for like 4 or 5 months and haven't bought a home yet. And all they've seen over the last 4 or 5 months is what they could qualify for, the type of home they were able to buy 4 or 5 months ago, had they bought it back then, and compared to what they're able to buy today, they're just watching that diminish. And so they're pretty frustrated, and understandably so. They thought that, hey, I could take my time, find the ideal home, and then all of a sudden interest rates start going up, and now this person feels like, well, wait a minute, I can't, what I was going to get to enjoy for a monthly payment is going to be up 50% of that now. And so it's frustrating, and I get it. But there's another group of people. These are the folks that haven't been in the market in renting until recently. They're the interest rates, that the way they are today is how they're shopping for homes today. They haven't seen it any other way. And so, for that group of buyers, this isn't a huge shell shock for them. They're pretty excited. And if you're wondering, well, who's still buying homes? It's a lot of the people that are buying homes right now are people that are just now coming into the market who haven't been pre-exposed to the lower interest rates that they had and the relationship to what that could buy you in the market here locally. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. And so we're seeing that playing out right now on Main Street. And so we're really talking to folks about, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, which is, as frustrating as it might be, just think through this for a minute. If you wait years longer before you decide to buy as a result of this short-term issue that we're running into with likely a recession, like you said, coming, think about what that cost might mean to you, based on the example I gave.
Well, I was thinking there's this business coach I was listening to the other day, and he talked about some of the qualities of people that succeed at a high level.
Yeah.
And one of them was, he said, their ability to forget. Their ability to immediately focus on the next move and not get caught up in failure or past or setback. Yeah, exactly. And so that, to me, that's kind of in that same vein of like, hey, look, November 2021 is gone.
It's gone.
Don't take that interest rate quote you got. You throw it in trash. That's done. That's behind you. That's the play behind you. And when he was talking about that, I thought about Tom Brady, because I remember seeing an interview with Tom Brady about it. He was like, I'm on to the next play.
Yeah.
So it's
Can't
that
do
same
anything about
thing.
the last one.
Past, it's done. So it's where are you right now?
Yep.
What does the market look like now?
Yep.
What do you think the market's going to look like in 6 months? Do
Yeah.
you think suddenly there's going to be huge inventory and no demand?
Yeah.
Do you think interest rates are going to drop down to 4% by November? I mean, nothing tells us that.
Yeah.
But if you lock in now, a year and a half, 2 years from now, at some point those interest rates will come back down.
Sure.
And even if they didn't, you locked in a lower interest rate now than if you wait 6 months and buy it and they're at 6 1/3.
Yeah.
Because that's where it's going. That's the trajectory.
Oh, it is. I mean, the rates are looking like they're going to be in, like we said, in the sixes here in the near future. At some point the housing market will break. My guess is around 6.5% mortgage rates will push the market and then translate into a recession. I mean, because housing represents something like 17-18% of the overall economy. I mean, it's a big number. Once the housing market, gets hit by the higher interest rate and starts to really slow down, I think you'll start to see that ripple effect across the rest of the country in terms of all the other different markets. So if that turns out to be the case, once we move into a recession, the Federal Reserve won't have necessarily the same pressure, because with a recession, you kind of usually assume that you're going to start to see your inflation falling down too. And at some point, that supply chain that we keep talking about, at some point, it's going to begin to catch up. And that's really going to put that inflationary number in a more reasonable level. And then at that point, the Fed won't feel the need to raise rates more when they start to feel like, hey, there's proof that the inflation's slowing down. And when they do that, like you said, that's when they'll start to maybe even try to help pull us out of recession by bringing those rates down again. Here's the question. Housing, let's just say it was flat. Let's say it is what it is today when we're in a housing recession. If the Fed starts dropping the interest rate in order to stimulate the economy again, what do you think that'll do to home prices?
Well, they're going to go up.
They're going to probably go up, right? And they're going to go up in correlation with how fast that rate goes down. And so for folks that are out there shopping, it's like you said, it's okay that the rate's higher. Take the home. And when the rates drop, refinance to the lower rate. But if you don't want to be in a situation where you're falling behind on your equity that you're gaining over time, both from appreciation in the market, paying down your mortgage balance, and then compare that to renting, right? Where rents are going up. It's still financially, it's a pretty darn smart move. I don't see too many experts that would boohoo at that too much. Housing is not like the stock market. What did the stock market do over the last couple of weeks?
It's been tanking big time.
Big time. Housing market hasn't.
Crypto's been tanking big
Right.
time.
And it was all that fake money stuff. I mean, helicopter money falling out of the sky. It went right into crypto. It went right into the stock market. And that's why we had these nice bubbles there. The housing market didn't do that. It didn't do that.
I'm trying to remember the other day I was talking to my financial advisor and he was telling me about a stock. I won't say it, but it was trading at about a quarter of its high.
Oh, wow.
Right. And he's like, oh, I think it's value. And I said, what's the PE ratio? And he's like, hold on, 37. And I was like,
hold on. Our listeners don't know what the PE ratio is.
Price to earnings ratio. So that
Right.
means, for every share,
Yeah.
how much money did they
Yeah.
make versus how much it costs,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
if they said, well, there's 1 billion shares and they made $1 billion,
Yep.
and the stock was trading $1, you're like, oh, the P ratio is 1-to-1, which never happens, by the way.
Right.
But you'd be like, oh, okay, I bought the share for $1 because it made
Yeah.
$1. So it had dropped down 75% of its high value.
Yep.
And it was still trading at 37 times how much they were actually making.
Which is really crazy, is what Joey's saying on this.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Like, not like I'm stock guy, but I remember, I first started reading stocks 20, 30 years ago, and PE ratios would be like 13.
Yeah,
for high
15,
PE ratios.
17.
Those would be
yeah.
high PE ratios.
Yep.
Now, though, the tech world, it's just the PE ratios are insane.
They're not, well, it's not attached to reality anymore.
At all.
Yeah,
Not at
it's
all.
because there's so much investor participation in the stock market. That's
So
all.
much emotion.
Yeah. Well, and every time, they print money, every single time, it always does the same thing. It flows into a couple areas, and typically it's going to flow into the stock market somewhere as a result of that. And, we've printed so much money over the last couple of years. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So we're all paying the price now for that free money with inflation. And every household now is going to have to deal with it. Everybody's talking about the gas prices and everything else. And that's having a real impact. And if you want to draw that back to real estate, fuel prices are having an impact on the more rural communities around Reading. The values of homes are being impacted in some manner because of the commutes getting longer. So like if you live in if you work in Reading and now living 30 minutes away from, your office in Reading now is no longer as attractive as it was before because the cost of fuel now is, $6 a gallon. Where when you thought about doing it before, it might have been $2.50 a gallon, $3 a gallon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're having some impacts from that indirectly too, with like fuel prices.
So, to recap it, yes, interest rates have gone up.
Yep.
But Reading has very, very low inventory.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be incredibly hard and slow to replenish that inventory.
Yep.
Reading is a destination for people to move to. People are not leaving Reading. I mean, you may have my friend moved to Idaho. What are you talking about? For every friend that moved to Idaho, there's 2 or 3 people that moved from San Jose,
Yep.
Stockton, Roseville to Reading.
Yep.
So
and people moving back. I mean, I've had friends move back from Idaho. I've had friends move back from Montana. And I'm not boohooing any of those locations, but everybody thinks the grass is greener. And then they go and they look and they go, wait a minute, it's the same green grass I had before, so.
Well, I'm not going to say any names, but we have several friends that moved east of here, and every one of them, it was hard. We'd get on calls with them, and they don't want to flat out admit, but you could just hear it when they would talk about like ice storms and weather,
tornadoes.
And I was talking to one of them the other day, and I won't say who and I won't say where, but there's a TV show based on where he moved. And he said, people here just don't care. And what do you mean? He goes, like, they don't bathe. They don't care. Like, they just don't care. And he goes, at first it was kind of cool because there's not this pressure.
Yeah.
He's like, but at some point you're like,
I want to care.
You've been wearing that shirt 4 days in a row. You need to go.
Oh, man.
He just, and it was a buddy that he left California and he shook his fist when he left.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, California's so awesome. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I was not going to be like, I told you so. I was not going to rub his nose in it. I tried to support him. I'm like, hey man,
it's tough. I mean, it depends. I mean, if you're chasing kids around the country and, wanting to be around the grandkids and all that stuff, I totally get all that. I mean, family, you want to keep the family together. That makes total sense. And, kids might be chasing work, and then then the parents start chasing the kids so they can be around the grandkids. I get all that. I mean, if my wife and I were to leave Reading, it would be because we were chasing grandkids somewhere. I'm sure of it. That would probably be the only thing that would pull us away, and probably wouldn't even pull us away full time. It would just be a portion of the time, because Reading at the end of the day. I mean, when you think about The fact that we are surrounded on three sides by just majestic mountains, that we have lakes that most of the time have water in them. We have, we can ski, just, an hour away from home and get to the coast in a couple hours and have a great weekend. You can go down to the city if you want to go and experience the city. I mean, and the people, we live amongst some of the coolest people in the country. And
That's a bold statement, Josh.
I believe it though. I really do. And they're awesome people. I can understand why people from the Bay Area or Southern California, they come up here and spend a couple of weeks with us, and get to meet some of our residents up here. I'd fall in love with this place too. So yeah, I'm definitely biased. But I also think that for those of our folks that have left the area, it wasn't because of Redding that they left. No, I would say they left because of the state of California,
taxation, and things like that.
They were frustrated about other things.
Yeah.
And, that's a part of the equation, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, man, this is a great place to be. So, in any case, man, I appreciate the time today again.
Likewise, man.
Always has fun. I always have fun rapping with you a little bit on this stuff.
Likewise.
But yeah, for all you listeners out there, hope you guys have a great May. And we'll talk to you guys next month.
Sounds good. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, thanks.
If you're enjoying the All Things Real Estate podcast, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.